This story begins with Izuku Midoriya, a little child around the age of 4 years old, on the beach with his mother. And he begins to walk out into the water, and his mother stumbles toward him and tells him, oh, be careful, like, don't go too far, and blah, blah, blah. And as Izuku would step into that water, and as he would feel the water form around his feet, and as the water would begin to, connect with Izuku's body, things begin to change. Because the water all around him begins to surge. The water begins to completely splash and crash and cover him entirely. And Izuku's mother, Inko Midoriya, is freaking out, running over toward him, thinking that he's going to drown. He's going to be hurt. But that's not the case. Izuku is doing this subconsciously on his own, and Izuku can feel the water covering him entirely until it's just a bubble. Izuku looks back at his mother, and he's already deep within the water, or deeper than he would normally have gone. And he looks back, and he waves toward her, and she's in shock. His quirk. It must be some sort of water-based quirk. But how did he get it? What's happening? I mean, it just showed up so soon, and it's so powerful. This is insane. Izuku's mother, or Inko, would go over toward Izuku and tell him to come back, to come over here, in which he does. He walks forward as the bubble would then go away, and the water would move out of its way for Izuku, and then allow him to walk straight out onto the shore. And this is absolutely shocking, excuse me. And Inko's thinking, whoa, like his quirk, his power might just be something completely different, something insanely overpowered, in which they immediately go to the doctors and they talk to the doctor about what his quirk does, what he could do. And there's a bit of an explanation of what he could do, what his quirk does, and stuff like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, all they really know is that it's some water-based quirk, and that's literally it. I mean, what else could they possibly know? What else could they possibly say? All they know, it's some water-based quirk, and that's it. And Izuku, well, as he goes throughout life and as he gets older and as he goes through middle school and elementary school and different things like that, Izuku would be preparing himself for whatever's to come. But he's always felt this connection to the water itself, and he's always felt like he should always be around there. The water is where he feels safe, the most safe, and really safe in general. And he would always go there every day after school. He would head over to the shores of Dagobah Beach, and he would walk the shores. He would go in through the water. He would do anything he could just to feel connected to the water once again. And he's one of those kids that would run out in the rain when it would begin to rain. If it rained, he'd be out there. He'd be running around, having fun. He'd be feeling the water droplets smack against his head, up against his face, and against his body, and he would really have a connection to the water itself. And Izuku would be preparing himself, well, to eventually go to UA High School and eventually try out for the UA entrance exam. But it all starts truly on one of the last days of middle school, when his teacher is telling everybody that he knows that they all want to be heroes, and they all want to be, next up and coming heroes. So he knows they all want to go that route, and none of them are going to get some regular job. In which, that's the truth. Izuku is one of those kids that wants to get into UA, but so is Katsuki Bakugo. And he begins to say that really the only person that should even try to go into UA other than himself would be Izuku, because nobody else really stands a chance. In which Izuku tells him, hey man, you don't gotta tell them that. That's not very nice. You gotta, sometimes you gotta pull it back a little bit. You know what I mean? You don't have to just completely just dismantle people and their hopes and dreams. In which he's like, okay, I hear you, but I mean, they're still, a bunch of losers, and they're just not very strong. In which Izuku's kind of shakes his head. He goes, all right, I hear you. But, we could be nicer. You can be nicer. In which, that's of course the case. And this time around, especially in this version, Izuku and Bakugo get along far better. There's a lot more kind of friendship there between him and Bakugo, and Bakugo has massive respect for Izuku, and from time to time Izuku is having that opposite attitude and that opposite kind of personality helps with calming Bakugo's kind of insanity from time to time, right? There's time to time where Bakugo is just like, you know, going off on people or doing this or saying this or kind of doing all these things, and Izuku's able to kind of keep him in check to an extent, at least to an extent, like I said. But at the end of the day, Bakugo is going to be Bakugo, so he's going to yap, he's going to get loud, he's going to get mad, he's going to yell, scream, threaten people. That's what Bakugo does. So nonetheless, yes, Izuku is keeping him a little bit more tame than anyone else would possibly know, but at the same time would still, you know, kind of have that like Bakugo feeling where he's like angry and doing this and doing that and saying this and saying that, because that's what he, you know, that's what he does. Now, with all that said though, Izuku just is preparing for the UA entrance exam, and when he heads home that day, he's excited to just go off and get better and get stronger and hope that he can really just prepare himself even better for that exam. And what he wouldn't expect though is to run into something, run into someone, and run into kind of a villain of some sorts going underneath a literal kind of bridge where there's a manhole cover covering the sewers. Now, this villain would be the sludge villain. The sludge villain comes surging out trying to attack him, but Izuku would just halt him in place. It seems odd, but there is some leftover like sewage water and stuff like that. And honestly, the sludge villain is made up of partially water. So Izuku just halts him entirely, just stopping him from moving and basically telling him to relax, calm down, that there's no point in fighting, no point in trying to hurt people, that he could be a better person. He could do this, just be a better, you know, person in general. But the sludge villain continues to struggle forward, continues to tell the kid that no, he's gonna take his body, he's gonna blah blah blah, he's gonna do this. Which is like, he shakes his head and he's like, all right, man, I tried to give you the out, I tried to, you know, help you out here, I tried to stop you from, you know, doing something stupid, but you decided against it, so now you're going to have to deal with it. In which Izuku immediately would just blow up the sludge villain into little pieces and then would just go to walk away, because he knows the sludge villain, I mean, like, this thing's probably was getting chased by someone, so they'll probably be able to handle it. But before he could even leave, well, All Might comes out of the sewer and he immediately is like, whoa, where'd the sludge villain go? In which Izuku points to the ground to say like, yeah, that's where the sludge villain is. Which All Might's like, whoa, that's insane. Did you do this? In which Izuku says, well, hypothetically, if I did, will I be in trouble? And of course, All Might's like, no, you're not going to be in trouble with me. In which he basically says, yeah, I did it, but I mean, he's all right. I mean, he's made of sludge, so it'll be okay. In which All Might asks him some questions like, oh, how did you do it? You know, like, were you, how were you capable of doing it? You know, and stuff like that. And Izuku kind of does a small explanation of what he's capable of, what he can do, and just kind of like what he's able to do with his water quirk. And which this is when, you know, they're kind of like, whoa, or he's kind of like, that's pretty damn impressive, like really impressive. And he asks him like, you know, what else could you do? And Izuku says like, well, there's a lot of things that I could do, but there's no guarantees with everything, right? There's no, like, he doesn't know for sure if he's able to do everything or do this or do that. Everything's kind of hypothetical right now because he's still training, he's still trying to work hard, trying to get stronger and stuff like that. So there's no guarantee with what he can do, but he's still training to the utmost height to try to get to whatever level he possibly can. And well, All Might helps clean up the sludge villain and they get it all settled and stuff like that into little bottles. And of course, All Might's like, you know what, I hope to see you very soon, kid, going to the UA entrance exam, because I think your potential is off the freaking charts, and I think your potential is beyond, you know, what a lot of people could possibly imagine. And yeah, that's the case, right? Izuku's potential is insane, and the training for the UA entrance exam would finally be approaching, and Izuku would spend all of his time, literally all of his time, just at Dagobah Beach, working hard, training, trying to learn new ways of utilizing his quirk, from different kind of ways of attacking, different ways of strengthening his power. And he even decides to even hold a good little bit of water on him, kind of thinking like, you know what, there's a good chance I will need water to actually utilize. But Izuku does learn that he can utilize water to an extent anywhere. Like if there's the grounds nearby, he can sap water from that. If there's clouds full of water but it hasn't quite rained, or if it's raining, he can do that. If there's a big body of water or any water, he could even use it from his own body, but that's kind of iffy for himself. He doesn't really want to do that because that's kind of makes him more tired, makes him slower. But if he needs to, as a last resort, he could utilize water from himself and or utilize water from other people, which is a little bit interesting too. But that's something that he'll think about later. But he decides that he's gonna hold at least kind of like a jug of water, like a small jug of water on him, just to be utilizing for himself in the near future. And after a ton of training, he gets better in terms of utilizing a small amount of water, but he also gets better at utilizing a massive amount of water. He could basically make tsunamis if he wanted to, if he had enough water. He can, on top of that, make these types of rain, or kind of this raining purification that allows him to basically summon a rainstorm that should allow him to heal people, weaken people, and really help people out. But he hasn't really truly figured out all of the quote-unquote healing abilities involving his powers, but it's something that's going to be a point of contention very, very soon. Now, with all that said and done, the UA entrance exam will finally be upon us, and the UA entrance exam will be the first chance he gets to show off the powers he is truly capable of. And those powers, well, they're pretty damn impressive, more impressive than he personally even thought in the first place, because Izuku would eventually, finish up his written portion of the exam, but the main thing that he'd be getting to is the practical. And him and his tiny little water jug, like a tiny water jug, begins to slice through a ton of these robots. And yes, it's very impressive, but in a natural state, Izuku isn't the fastest person in destroying all of these robots. But at the same time, I mean, if he had a large body of water, it would be super, super easy for him to just easily just destroy these things, like destroy these robots and just obliterate them to nothingness. But of course, that's not the case right now. He doesn't have a large volume of water on him, but being able to slice through them is pretty simple. He basically just embeds them with water, or kind of gets water within them and just implodes them. It's that simple. Like, he just basically explodes them, and it's very basic. And he tries his best to kind of get to like the oil and stuff like that within the robots, but it's kind of difficult to get to it, and it's kind of difficult to get to those aspects of the robot. So it's not the easiest thing in the world, but at the end of the day, he's able to destroy a ton of robots, just not enough to get the number one. And this would eventually lead him to actually facing off with a 0-point robot as well, trying to protect somebody. And Izuku, well, he would run over, pushing all the rubble off of a girl by the name of Ochako, and he would immediately think like he has to do something, but it's going to make him extremely tired, in which he's running out of water, so he does sap it from his own body, which actually in turn is stronger than normal. But Izuku basically does make water within his body a lot quicker, but it still makes him tired and still makes him basically dehydrated and stuff like that. So he basically sends this spiral of water to the giant robot, knocking it over, and in turn saving the girl that needed help. Now, after doing all of that, Izuku got quite a bit of points. I mean, he's just not quite there in terms of the number one student, because he just didn't destroy that many robots. I mean, he destroyed quite a bit, don't get me wrong, but he just didn't destroy that many robots. Now, with all that said though, They then finish off the practical portion of this UA entrance exam, and then it's all said and done for Izuku Midoriya in terms of preparation to getting to that next portion of what he wants to get to, aka the next portion being that of UA High School. And going off from the UA entrance exam to UA High School would only take maybe about a week. And once they head off and once they go to the UA High School for the first time, Izuku enters and he is greeted by quite a few different people that possibly saw him at the entrance exam, or people like Bakugo who like actually know him, in which is of course cool to see, sort of. Bakugo is somewhat respectful and stuff like that, but the first true thing that he's going to be tested on is actually this this so-called kind of quirk assessment that Aizawa sets up. And the thing that actually is a little bit tough is that he's not amazing at anything. He's kind of middle of the pack at almost everything. Now, don't get me wrong, he's not weak. He's not weak by any means, but at the same time, he's kind of lacking in a lot of the physical attributes, and he has to really utilize a ton of water if he really wants to do things properly, right? And that's something that is brought up. And he tells Aizawa that he gets it if he's not going to allow him to be by a large body of water or something like that, because that's not necessarily realistic. Like, you're not always going to be in that circumstance. So he understands that that would not be the case. And Aizawa says, you know what, how about this? We're going to have you do it normally, see where you're at. And then we're going to go and have you retested by a ton of bodies or by a body of water of some sorts. And when they do this, I mean, Izuku gets around middle of the pack, like I said, for the first part. But the second time he tests, I mean, he blows everybody out of the water. Well, no pun intended. Well, I kind of pun intended. Now, he blows everybody out of the water because his strength is so much stronger when he is around a body of water. He's able to throw the ball further. He's able to be, like I said, stronger. He's able to be quicker. He's able to be all these things. And he just shows off, and he would technically have gotten the first in the exam or first in the quirk assessment if this was his first time actually, testing. But Izuku tells them that he understands that this isn't realistic, that being around a body of water isn't always the most realistic thing. So he'll take his previous score of like 12 or something, right? It's like 12th place or something, maybe even lower, maybe a tiny bit lower, but around like 12, maybe to 15. And Izuku knows that this is kind of like, the reality of what he can do, at least without proper things. And I mean, even if he had like a couple jars of water, he would have done even better, but he didn't have that on him. He didn't really think about actually having that on him at that moment. But of course, Aizawa honestly is still pretty impressed by this. I mean, a student that understands his limitations and a student that understands that not every single circumstance is going to be to his benefit is someone that is going to be a ridiculously good hero in the near future. And it's something that, well, a lot of heroes and a lot of different heroes, a lot of people need to truly understand themselves, because if they don't, well, they could fall short in the eyes of becoming a hero as well. But Izuku, on the other hand, he already has figured that part out. And when Izuku, well, gets his chance to actually show off his powers against actual people in the next up-and-coming training, which would be heroes versus villains, of course, it would be insane. Because Izuku shows off something that many people thought he would not even think about doing. And many people would think that, oh, no, that's not something he would actually do or something that he would actually decide to do. But it's something that is pretty damn scary when you put it into perspective. And that's, well, the ability to utilize the water in other people. Now, the heroes versus villains training is involving, well, mainly two things, right? The heroes versus villains training has, well, for starters, Izuku facing off against Katsuki Bakugo and Tenya Ida, excuse me, sorry about that. Katsuki Bakugo and Tenya Ida, and also has basically with Ochaku Uraraka, excuse me. And when they go off and they face each other, when Izuku is the hero team and Bakugo and them are the villain team, of course, we get a pretty damn interesting situation, because when Izuku enters that area and Bakugo comes surging in, he tells Izuku that without that water left over, he'll stand no chance. But then Bakugo begins to feel something. He begins to feel dehydrated, and then he begins to feel that he can no longer move. He gets planted into the ground, and Izuku is holding him still as they run by. Izuku tells him that there's water everywhere, even water within your body, in which Bakugo is pissed. But at the same time, he's kind of impressed, but he's also pissed. And he tries to get up, but he's exhausted, tired, all of these things, and he realizes, like, damn, what did he just do to me? In which this would lead them to facing off with Tenya, and about the same exact thing would still happen. Tenya would be put down pretty damn quickly, and, well, very, very fast. Before you possibly even know it, Tenya would be out of the fray as well, out of the fight as well, and it would be over for the villains, and the hero team would win, and Katsuki Bakugo would fall short against, well, Izuku Midoriya. Which is pretty damn insane, because Bakugo felt like he had the advantage here, but the fact is, he really didn't. The fact is, he actually did not have the advantage he really thought he would have, and he falls short once again when facing off with Izuku Midoriya. But here's the thing. There's so much more to do, so much more to come, and especially when they go to the USJ, a rescue facility that they're going to be training at, but a training exercise turned into a villain invasion is something that many would not have expected. But Izuku, well, let's just say they would put him in a wrong spot, at least if you were the villains trying to actually win, because the villains would show up, Kurogiri and portals would open with Shigaraki and all of them. But guess what? Once that happens, once all of that occurs, and once, guess what? Once Kurogiri starts teleporting everyone everywhere, Izuku goes into one place that they really shouldn't have put him. And that is a large body of water. Because he falls into the water and he realizes, oh, they have messed up. Because he sits there and he realizes quickly that whoever gave them this information, whatever traitor, whatever person, however they found this out, they left out a lot of information that really should have been told to their villain little empire, because this is not the spot that he should have landed and not the spot that they should have put him. Because when the villains begin to show up within the water and try to attack Izuku, and Izuku starts moving better and quicker than them and starts beating them senseless within the water, they are shocked to see this and they're terrified. Asui is watching from above as Izuku basically knocks out and takes out all the villains, and then he would jump up, basically having the water path them away, and he tells Asui and Mineta to grab on and that they're going to get out of here, in which he grabs both of them as he basically surfs them all the way across to land, and Izuku says to basically go over there and hide behind that kind of like stone block thing that they have nearby. And he tells them to hold their breath if they need to, but they should be okay. In which he puts like a bubble around them, and then immediately would make it so all the water, or a ton of the water at least, would begin to surge out and make a tsunami of some sorts, wiping out legitimately all of the villains that are there, at least the villains that, are like lower level villains, like not the Nomu and stuff, but knocking out all the villains across the entirety, literally across the entirety of the USJ, and all the hero, or all the students, and Aizawa and, Pro Hero 13 and stuff like that are shocked. All these villains are knocked out in one foul swoop, and Izuku, well, he still has water all over the place. And this is when Shigaraki, Kurogiri, and also the Nomu are forced into the fight a lot earlier than they would have thought, and Izuku will then watches as the Nomu tries to attack Aizawa. But immediately, Izuku tries to help out Aizawa, getting him out of harm's way and moving him, trying to move him out of the way of the Nomu so that the Nomu doesn't absolutely just destroy him. Now, I will say this, it doesn't help a ton, right? The Nomu still catches the leg of Aizawa, and it breaks it, breaking Aizawa's leg. And Izuku, well, he tries to think of something, tries to help him, getting some of the water he has, getting him out of harm's way, and immediately trying to basically stop this Nomu from attacking anyone else. And that's what he does. He stops the Nomu from attacking quite a bit of people, and stops the Nomu from basically just continuing this absolute onslaught he was going to basically do upon Aizawa. And he gets him out of the way and stops the Nomu, and begins to kind of see if the Nomu has like water within him, hoping that he can just halt the Nomu entirely. But he can to an extent. He can't really like halt the Nomu full on, but he can to an extent. And he begins to try his best to like do something, right? He tries his best to slow him down or do something. But the thing is, right now, Izuku doesn't have the ability to really just destroy the Nomu the way he wants to. And just as he's thinking that he's not going to be able to really slow this guy down any longer, he finally realizes something. He finally realizes that All Might has now arrived. And when All Might arrives, Izuku has an idea of something he's been working on for a while, and something he's been trying to basically work with for a while as well. In which immediately when All Might arrives, he begins to start having all the water float up into the air, and everyone's in shock. What is happening? I mean, the only villains that are left are Shigaraki, Kurogiri, and the Nomu. And this is when everyone is in complete and utter awe, because those two villains are immediately covered in a bubble of water, unable to actually move, and are slowly but surely passing out from the lack of oxygen. But on top of that, it begins to rain. Yes, it's raining indoors, which is kind of odd, and everyone's very confused about it. But then they realize something. This isn't normal rain. They feel stronger. They feel better. They feel more kind of entwined, right? They feel less exhausted. All of the above, which is kind of interesting and kind of wild when you put it into perspective. Because how is this happening? But on top of that, the water, the rain, this heavenly rain is helping them, is making them feel better, is making them stronger, is weakening the villains, but also it's healing them. Any injuries that they have, it's healing them. And All Might, as he fights, feels like he's getting stronger and stronger and stronger, which is all the reason why is because of that rain. And the fight, well, would go quicker than you could think, because eventually they would fall, or the villains would fall, and well, Shigaraki and Kurogiri would be out cold, ready for the heroes to arrive to capture them entirely, lock them away, and never let them out again. In which this is insane, because Izuku, well, he would then eventually kind of collapse a little bit and be exhausted, saying that he needs water, he needs something right now, because he is damn freaking tired. In which immediately they get everybody out of there, and immediately Izuku would get rehydrated and stuff like that, which is always good. And it's honestly good for him to push his quirk the way he did, because the more he does that, the more he'll start understanding his limitations and so on. Now, with all that said, though, Izuku has helped and did help quite a bit during this circumstance. But on top of that, we now know something that they didn't know in the first place. And that is that his heavenly rain, his ability to an extent, his ability is now allowing him, or does allow him, to legitimately heal people. And this is shown, well, with All Might, because All Might himself would eventually admit to Izuku days after this happened that he had a really bad injury, a really bad one. And then he lifts up his shirt to show that the injury is like halfway, if not like 75% of the way healed. In which Izuku asks him, like, I mean, the injury's still there, like, you still have an injury. But immediately All Might's like, no, this used to be 50% worse, at least. In which he tells him whatever he did healed him. He doesn't know how, He doesn't know, like, exactly how it occurred, what occurred, and what the explanation of it is, but he healed him. He helped him, and he was able to basically heal him from an injury that was determined to basically destroy his ability to work as a hero. And that right there is something that is insane to think about, because Izuku basically saved basically All Might from actually being at a point where he wouldn't have been able to legitimately be a hero anymore. He would literally not be able to be a hero anymore. And this put him at a better state. This put him at a point where he could genuinely still be a hero. He could genuinely still be the hero he wants to be. And that is 100% the case. Izuku Midoriya has given an opportunity to All Might that he never expected himself to have. He never expected himself to actually have the ability to truly still be the hero he wants to be. And he asked the kid, could he still heal him? Could he still do something? Could he still like fully heal him? And which Izuku says, maybe. But we're going to have to talk about that a little later. We have a lot to prepare for, and that includes the UA Sports Festival, excuse me. And that's something Izuku has to prepare for, and something that he's excited for, but at the same time, like, come on. It's going to be difficult for him, especially with any lack of water. So yes, he goes into the UA Sports Festival with high hopes, but he's not expecting himself to just clean house and win easily. But that's really the case until he's told that he's allowed to carry with him a basically enough water for every single time, right? So like every single event he goes into, he'll have a new thing of water. And that right there is like, oh, you know what? That's really helpful. So the obstacle course race, it's not too difficult for Izuku. Izuku is able to utilize some of the water to basically make himself quicker and make himself slide across different areas a lot easier, but he still doesn't, get some insane score, or he might get first place, but it's not by like a lot. He'll like barely get first place. Like he just gets it, and everyone is kind of like, whoa, like that was pretty insane. But I mean, he basically would barely get it. He would, just like in normal, he would barely get first place. Now the cavalry battle, with the water he has, and also his ability to halt people with the water within their body, I mean, that makes it easy work for the cavalry battle, and easy for dealing with certain people and certain people's like powers and strengths and weaknesses. And funny enough, those would be the two hardest kind of events for Izuku. At least the first one would be like the hardest one for him to just make sure to keep up and make sure to, go along. Now, in terms of 1 versus 1s, I mean, this right here is where he does his best work. Because when he faces off with Shinso and he learns that, obviously he just doesn't have to talk to him or can't talk to him, he basically utilizes the water within Shinso's body and shoves him straight off of the area. And this is a pretty big kind of flag for someone like Todoroki, who's about to face him next. And he realizes, like, okay, I have to make sure I'm careful with the way I approach things, because if I'm not, I might just get shoved off this kind of podium or this stage before you could possibly even know it. And of course, Izuku is preparing himself for whatever he needs to prepare himself for, and he immediately would prepare for the ice coming from Todoroki. And this would only be in the benefit of Izuku, because he'd be able to actually manipulate the ice itself, every bit of it that Todoroki is utilizing, and he would turn it into water itself and push Todoroki straight off. Now, this is when Todoroki will be able to save himself just briefly, and Izuku asks him that is he afraid to use his fire side because he's utilizing water? I mean, he lacks so much in water, but why not combine both ice and fire? It might help him out a little bit more. I mean, the fire is probably going to be better against his water than just giving him more water through ice. In which, of course, Todoroki basically shuts this down, saying that that is not his quirk. The ice is truly a part of him, but the fire is his father's. In which Izuku shakes his head and says that is your quirk, Todoroki. That is. The fire that is within you, the fire that you can use, and the fire and ice that you can put together is your quirk. But Izuku would then create a giant wave of water from the ice that was created, and he tells Todoroki that if he doesn't want to use it, he doesn't have to. But he'll be regretting it because he's going to lose right now. Izuku sends a tsunami of some sort right at Todoroki and immediately would smack him straight into a wall, as Todoroki would try to save him with ice, but Todoroki would try to save himself with ice, but would be unable to do so. And Izuku would be looking at him, shaking his head, as out of nowhere, Izuku would be within the water and on the ice and smack him with a kick, sending him right outside of the stage, or right outside of kind of like the area that they're fighting in. And Todoroki's in shock. How did he do that? He didn't even know he could do that. And when Izuku would shrug his shoulders and tell him that he never really stood a chance in the first place, because, well, that fire would never have worked, but he was just giving him more and more fuel, the more and more ice that was sent his way. And Izuku Midoriya, I mean, he would absolutely destroy the rest of the people there. I mean, yes, he would take down Tenya pretty easily, and same thing with Bakugo, and this would even frustrate Bakugo to an extent, but it's hard to, be upset when you were beaten fair and square, and you were given the opportunity to fight the person that continues to defeat you over and over and over again. So yes, he is pissed. Yes, he is angry. Yes, he is mad. And yes, he is giving a little bit of a temper tantrum, you could call it. But he knows that he was beaten because Izuku was better. And it's that simple. He can't get around that. He can't complain about that. And he understands that he was better, or Izuku was better, and he has to fall on that sword. And Izuku Midoriya would be the first person, or the first place, aka the winner of the UA entrance exam. And that's, or the UA Sports Festival. Sorry about that. I don't know why I keep saying that. The UA Sports Festival. And he would be the winner in something that originally would have been a little bit more difficult if he wasn't given a little bit of water here and there so that he could actually utilize it like other people, right? Like how other people utilize their own quirks. Now, with all that said, those first two portions of the UA entrance or the UA Sports Festival, oh my goodness, I keep saying it, I apologize. The UA Sports Festival would have been the harder parts, and then he cleaned up the end of it, and he cleaned up the one-on-ones, and he was able to defeat those people and those, the people that he had to face off with. And this would get him a ton of people wanting him to come to his internship, or to their internship. And one person that would really catch his eye, and it was because of, one person that would definitely put in a good note for him, and that would be Sir Night-Eye. Sir Night-Eye would be wanting an internship with Izuku Midoriya because of All Might. And it all starts because All Might and Izuku would head off to Sir Night-Eye's agency with the acceptance, and, they would watch kind of a reconciliation between All Might and Sir Night-Eye. And they would shake hands to an extent, even if, of course, Sir Night-Eye doesn't agree with everything that All Might has been doing, or All Might does. But there's one thing and one reason why they're here, because Izuku tells them that he's going to take All Might to the ocean, or he's going to take him to the beach, Dagobah Beach, and they're going to do something. And he feels that Sir Night-Eye will want to be there. So they head off to Dagobah Beach, and he tells All Might to walk within the water. Walk within the water and embrace it. Do not resist it. Fall within the water. You will not be hurt. You will not, suffocate. You will not, you'll be able to breathe. You'll be all right. In which he tells them that everything that you know now, you have to do the opposite. Because normally people try to swim to the surface, but you have to let yourself fall to the bottom. In which That's what All Might does. Walks out there, and Izuku follows closely. And Sir Night-Eye, watches in a little bit of panic, and he's hoping that he'll be all right. He's emerged into the water, and Izuku emerges with him, and a bubble would conform, but All Might's entire body would light up with basically this light, but it would be like a weird like a immersion of light that would be happening within the water, and Izuku would be healing All Might, and after 30 minutes they come out, and Izuku tells him to lift up his shirt just a little bit to see that what happened to his absolute horrible injury, and they look, and it's gone, and Sir Night-Eye is in shock. How did he do it? That's insane. Your power can do so much. Your power could heal thousands, tens of thousands, millions. In which Izuku nods his head and says that he will heal as many as he possibly can, and maybe one day there will be no sickness, there will be no hunger, there will be no anything, there will be no hurting, there will be no horrible things happening to good people. Maybe they'll be able to save so many lives, more than you could imagine. But for now, he's still learning. He's still a kid, and he's still pushing forward. And he shakes All Might's hand, shakes Sir Night-Eye's hand, and Sir Night-Eye tells him that he has a place in his agency anytime he wants it. In which Izuku says that he only wants it if he deserves it. And he asks Sir Night-Eye, does he truly believe he deserves it, or is he doing this as a favor to All Might? In which Sir Night-Eye shakes his head, says he deserves it. You deserve it, kid. He says you are exceptional in what you can do, and having you around, it will definitely be good for my agency. And this is when Izuku will start working with Sir Night-Eye, working with Mirio, working with Bubble Girl, and basically maintaining a friendly repertoire with all of them, right? Every single one of them. And really, Bubble Girl is kind of smitten by Izuku. I mean, it kind of fits the mold, because obviously Bubble Girl and Izuku basically have the powers of godly water, or even you can even call him an aqua deity to an extent. And Izuku is basically showing off all of these powers, training with a bunch of them. But as one good thing comes, a bad thing would occur, because soon they would get a phone call, and that phone call would be from UA High School. And that phone call would be from about one person, Tenya Ida. Izuku would be sent back to UA. He tells them all that they'll see each other very soon. And Mirio tells him that he'll see him at school, and they'll be chatting further, definitely more than you can imagine. And they would go off, and he would head off back into class, sit down, and he would learn that Tenya Ida was extremely hurt in battle. In which Izuku would immediately stand up and ask Aizawa, where is he? Where is he? In which Aizawa says, whoa, kid, chill out, right? Like, but Izuku cuts him off. Where is he? I can heal him. I can help him. I just need to be where he's at. I need to get him to the beach. In which everyone's in shock. Are you serious? You can do that. In which Izuku says, yes. Don't ask him how. But how he knows, he just knows. I can do it. In which Aizawa basically cancels class and gets Izuku and heads off. And basically Izuku's headed off to basically save Tenya Ida's life. And he would immediately get there and see his parents there and other people too. And he would tell them that they need to get Tenya to the beach right now. In which they would ask him why. I mean, if they leave here, who knows how long he'll survive? In which immediately Izuku takes a ton of the water from like the jugs he has and the water around, and he would then cover Tenya in this water, and he would tell him that he'll last as long as he needs to last until he gets to the beach. In which immediately Aizawa tells them that they need to trust the kid, like now, because Tenya will be here for the rest of his life doing nothing, just being basically stuck here in a hospital in a coma if they don't listen. The doctors look around wondering, what should we do, blah, blah, blah. And then the parents of Tenya, they decide, you know what? You're right. Let's do it. Whatever you have in mind, we trust you. And they trust Aizawa mainly because they don't really know Izuku, but they trust Aizawa being that he's a hero. And they head off to the beach. As they arrive, Izuku would take Tenya within the water with him, And as they would submerge themselves within the water, the bubbles would begin to form, or bubbles around, light begins to glimmer all around, and they stay beneath for 30 to an hour and a half, 2 hours. Parents begin to panic, saying they have to get him out of there. Well, he's gonna die, but Aizawa tells him, don't worry. The kid has it handled, I promise. 3 hours would go by, and eventually they would arrive, or they would arise. They would come out of the water, and Tenya would be standing, and he would be fully healed. No injuries, no nothing, not a single thing. In which Izuku would emerge as well, and Izuku would tell them that it went well. The ocean is happy, right? The ocean is happy to help, and the ocean really is connected to Tenya as well. In which they walk out, and Tenya's in shock, hugging his parents, and they're just in disbelief. Like, what just happened? What occurred? Like, I mean, seriously. And they question him and all this stuff. And Aizawa pats the kid on the back, and he says that this right here, this is more than any final exam. This right here is more than anything that they could think of. In which Izuku looks at him and says, does that mean I don't have to take my final exam? Like, did I already pass? In which Aizawa looks at him and smirks a little bit and nods his head and says, yeah, I think you're good, kid. I think you're good. Just make sure to pass the written portion, please. In which Izuku nods his head and says he'll get right to studying, as he pats Tenya on the back and says that he has to get going. But as he's about to leave, the mother of Tenya would hug him and thank him for saving her child. And Izuku says, well, that's just what the hero needs to, and also what a hero does. So, no reason to thank him, truly. He heads off and goes back to UA, goes back to his home, and just studies up, gets prepared, and he finishes his final exam, or his written portion of the final exam, and he watches as his classmates and his teammates and everybody else takes on their practicals, and he watches closely as everybody goes through their practical exams, and he prepares himself for the training that they're going to go through in the near future at the forest training camp. Because the forest training camp is only one bus ride away and one push off a cliff away. So Izuku Midoriya is preparing himself and prepared for some of the best and also the most worthwhile training he has ever gone through. But for now, that is where we're going to end off. What if Deku had a godly water quirk? Izuku Midoriya is off to the forest training camp and ready to train. And this would be a perfect time for Izuku, because this will allow him to flat out train to his heart's content over the course of a week to 2 weeks. Izuku, well, he is strong, powerful, and he can do quite a bit of different things. But being able to really harness his powers on a different level is something he's been working with for quite a while, and something he's been working with for honestly ever now. And this allows him to basically just get insane amounts of training in specified to his quirk, and it allows him to kind of grow in power and grow in strength where he actually wants to grow. Now, this has a lot to do with him actually having more water stored within his body, being able to basically utilize water just out of nowhere, right? Just out of the thin air. But also his ability to kind of sap water from other places, from the ground, from the air itself, from anything. It doesn't have to be rainy. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be super cloudy or anything like that. Just sap the water from any source he possibly can. Now, this may or may not kill a bunch of plants in the process, but we know that Izuku Midoriya will be able to utilize that water to its fullest extent, aka being able to, eventually save those plants if need be. But still, Izuku tries to find new ways of really generating a source of water, and this helps quite a bit because Izuku starts learning various ways of approaching it, and also how to basically utilize it even more so within the literal bloodstream of other people. Now, this is a little bit more brutal because he's actually utilizes it, or has utilized it before, by just halting people, basically like stopping them from moving. But he's never really used it so that he can fully control people. I mean, he could even borderline break their limbs. But of course, that's not something he wants to do. I mean, at the end of the day, he probably doesn't want to hurt anybody or get anyone hurt. So he's going to definitely refrain from doing stuff like that. But at the end of the day, Izuku has a way of utilizing every aspect of his quirk, and if that aspect arises to be something important or something that he could possibly use, he'll definitely see to the fact that he should use it. Now, this is since we continue on with all the training and all the above, we eventually finish off all this training, and we head off back to UA from the forest training camp. As we finish the forest training camp, and as we get set up for the very next thing, or the very next kind of situation, he basically gets prepared and prepares himself for whatever's to come, really. And what actually has what's going to come and what's going to happen is an actual fight, or an actual kind of a fight slash intermission with All For One. Now, this might sound weird, but it is something that will still occur. We have All For One show up once again, and All For One would show up to face off with All Might. But this way around, All Might would definitely have we're talking insane advantage. I mean, this guy is borderline back in his prime. Probably didn't even have to give up One For All if he so chose to do so, and he's still holding on to power beyond belief. And this is why Sir Night-Eye was so happy, right? So really, really happy that Izuku was able to heal him, or heal All Might, because he could still be the hero that he wanted All Might to be, and still be the hero that All Might wanted to be in the first place. And, well, let's just say he will take down All For One in one foul swoop. And even when All For One basically sends more Nomus and more these creatures to basically stop this entirely, or more creatures to kind of basically stop All Might from actually getting the upper hand, I mean, it doesn't work. Right? This time around, All Might not only knocks out All For One, but would absolutely dismantle all of these Nomus. But for some reason, All Might feels like this will not be the last time they stumble across All For One once again. But that's kind of beyond the point, because Izuku will continue on with his schooling, continue on with his training, and that would include, well, his kind of, a super move like training. But on top of that, the Provisional Hero License exam. This right here is something that would allow Izuku Midoriya and many others to gain a Provisional Hero License so they can start working with hero agencies. And this excites Izuku quite a bit. But the thing is when they head off and they get ready and they prepare themselves, the hero exam will be pretty damn difficult, because a lot of the people there already have an upper hand on them entirely. But what they don't know is that these students have trained their absolute asses off, because Izuku, well, he makes it very quick work of quite a bit of these other people that try to approach them and try to actually catch them off guard, basically halting them entirely and tagging them with, or having his teammates tag them with balls. But on top of that, he sets himself up to where he tags them all with balls, with dodgeballs as well. And honestly, these other people that get eliminated are confused and also kind of disturbed, right? Because they're like, whoa, that feeling of being absolutely halted, that feeling of being controlled almost, felt disgusting, felt horrible. It felt like they were being basically taken over. Like, they couldn't actually tell what they were doing, and they couldn't actually tell, like, what could possibly happen. Now, of course, Izuku didn't go that far with it. I mean, he straight up just made it so they couldn't move. He didn't really do anything else, but he could have genuinely made them walk on their own, run on their own, move their limbs on their own, or kind of, involuntarily, of course. But of course, Izuku doesn't do that and didn't do that. And he kind of just, handled things the way he thought needed to be. But a lot of them think, whoa, this kid is a freak. I mean, they heard that he was strong, but the fact that he was able to do that is scary, like really scary. And Izuku, he kind of ignores it because he's just smiley, he's happy, he's kind of calm, relaxed, and all these things. And frankly, a lot of people look at him like he's just some cool dude. Like, he's some cool, relaxed, charming guy. And but everybody who felt the power of Izuku upon them, they think he's terrifying. They're thinking, whoa, this guy might be something different. This guy is really, really scary. But of course, Izuku would continue to show off his capabilities, especially when, well, we get something that is pretty damn awesome to check out. Because we get something where Izuku basically helps out a ton with this next part of the quote-unquote exam, and that is like the rescue portion of this exam. And he would be able to quote-unquote heal some of these people, and Izuku kind of helps out where he can, you know, and he basically tells these people like I know you guys are actors and actresses, but I can literally heal people. Like, I don't know how that kind of works with the exam, but yeah, I could literally heal you. And he basically would start picking people up with excess water that he has, or even excess water that was around the area, and he would basically pick them up, put them in bubbles that were completely breathable, and he would just send them to the camp to get help. And Izuku would do this over and over again, and they would definitely be putting in their notes that Izuku could literally heal people, because, well, you can't really demonstrate that on people that aren't actually hurt, so it doesn't really work that well. But that is something to write down in their notes. And this would lead them to eventually seeing the quote-unquote fake villains showing up with Gang Orca and, you know, these other, like, you know, useless villains. I hate to say it like that, but they are pretty useless. And Izuku, well, he thinks, like, you know what, I should probably stay away from this. Like, I won't fight this just in case. But then he would see that one of the students from Shuketsu High would actually get destroyed, like absolutely destroyed. And he would think, okay, they might need my help just a little bit. But then he sees Inasa and Todoroki step up, and he tells Todoroki that whatever they're going to do, they better do it fast or send a bunch of ice that way. In which Todoroki's like, why would I send ice? In which he would like, oh, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. So he sends ice in the way of Gang Orca, and Izuku would begin to basically utilize the water from the ice and begins to just trap Gang Orca entirely. It might sound weird, but Gang Orca not being able to actually touch the ground and being kind of put into a bubble of water and unable to break it, I mean, it is something that is crazy. Now, will he like pass out from lack of oxygen? Probably not, because he is a whale and they can live pretty long without actual oxygen. And, you know, they have to come up for air eventually, but it's not something Gang Orca is going to have to worry about. But it basically just stops Gang Orca from moving and stops him from just, you know, doing anything crazy. And this actually makes it so Inasa and Todoroki don't really have to get their hands dirty in the fight against Gang Orca. But on top of that, I mean, it looks really good on Todoroki, giving Izuku a way of actually stopping this villain attack. And on top of that, Izuku is able to create even more water to knock out all of the rest of the villains in one foul swoop. He would then basically dab up Todoroki, being like, you know what, good job, bro, like blah blah blah. And they would be decent friends by this time, and everybody who's watching is thinking is like, whoa, them two, they're a pretty damn good duo. I mean, they might end up being one of the better duos in hero history if they're not careful about it, you know. And it seems like they're pretty damn strong together. And Inasa, yeah, he does help out by using his wind type of quirk and blowing over some of the villains. But other than that, I mean, he doesn't do a ton. So, but this is probably a good thing, because Inasa, if he clashed with Todoroki's fire, probably would have ended up being kind of a big L in terms of going on to the or getting your actual provisional hero license. And luckily enough, the time would eventually the sirens would go off, and Izuku would be done and dusted with the provisional hero license exam, and he would finally have his provisional hero license. This would obviously lead him to working with Sir Night-Eye once again, and we could have him face off with Mirio, and maybe they would face off and fight a little bit, and it would be a pretty interesting match. But overall, we know Sir Night-Eye already wants Izuku as another sidekick, so we have that completely happen once again. And this is kind of perfect because they are looking for a pretty dangerous villain, and he feels that Izuku will be perfect in terms of finding / stopping this quote-unquote villain. And this villain is, well, Overhaul. Overhaul is a pretty damn dangerous villain and a pretty damn crazy villain at that. And Izuku, well, he has all the potential in the world of stopping him. And, well, that eventually would come to pass when on a patrol with Mirio. They would come across Overhaul himself, and Izuku, well, he would look at Mirio, and Mirio would kind of flick his hand, basically saying, like, do the thing. Like, just do the thing, and everything should be good. In which Izuku has been able to literally completely stop and halt almost every single villain that he's ever dealt with. So he halts Overhaul entirely, making and holding complete control over his bloodstream, basically making him unable to move a singular muscle. He would completely just stop, and Overhaul would basically tell Izuku, like, when he gets out of this, he's going to kill them both, and he's going to show exactly why he is one of the most dangerous villains alive. And which Izuku says, yeah, you're right. When you're out of that, I bet you definitely will kill us. But guess what? What happens when you don't get out of it in time? What happens when I decide to move those wrists, and he begins to, like, move up Overhaul's wrists a little bit, and he tells him, what happens when I move those wrists and we get those cuffs clamped around your wrists and you can no longer use your quirk? What happens then, Mr. Overhaul? What happens then? And of course, Eri is standing behind Izuku and Mirio. Mirio picks her up and basically tells Izuku that he's already called for backup and already called for the police, and just to hold him still. And he asks him, you good? Like, are you going to be fine? In which Izuku says, if it makes you feel better, he would then throw out some water and put a bubble around Overhaul and floats him in the air. Izuku says, if it makes you feel better, I'll do that as well, just in case, if somehow I lose my grip. But Izuku says, I haven't lost my grip ever, so we'll be all right. In which that is the case. He holds him still, entirely still, the entire time. And Overhaul's sitting there for like a good 10 to 15 minutes like, dude, are you serious? Like, how were you able to do this? He's struggling. Like, he's shaking his entire body because he's struggling. Izuku tells him that if he continues to do that, his veins might just pop and he might just bleed out internally. So he might as well just chill out and wait until he goes to prison, because he could just end up doing something really bad to himself, like, really fast. In which he says, like, well, if it happens, then it's going to be on him anyways, and he'll have, well, basically a death on his record. And Izuku shakes his head and says, dude, you got to be kidding me, right? Like, we all know you're not going to basically divulge into something like that. And if you do, I mean, you're pretty psychotic for it. I mean, at the end of the day, if you do that, I almost guarantee you that it's going to be called as self-defense, and I'll get a slap on the freaking wrist. Like, I'm sorry to break it to you, man, but that's the reality of it. And it's all up to you the way you want to go out. Do you want to go out in handcuffs and behind bars, or do you want to go out with multiple bursted blood vessels and a broken arm? In which, of course, Overhaul looks at him and is just pissed. I mean, he is so angry. Like, this kid is cocky. This kid is, you know, like, basically shows off like, oh yeah, like I'm that dude, which Izuku really is that dude. But he basically is annoyed that he's even acting that way, right? Izuku or Overhaul is annoyed that Izuku is genuinely acting that way. But of course, I mean, come on. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what he does. And eventually, people would arrive, police would arrive, heroes would arrive, and the cuffs would go on. The cuffs would basically be straight onto Overhaul's hands and or wrists. And now it is, well, the end. It is the end of Overhaul, at least for now, as a villain, and it's the end of Overhaul, at least as the leader of the Shia Hazaikai. But of course, they still have to deal with the Shia Hazaikai themselves. They have to deal with the Shia Hazaikai themselves, of course. So that is something that Izuku and many other heroes will be helping out with as well. But really, Izuku has a plan among all plans, and he basically tells them, like, if they can, for the most part, make it so that anything within that building begins to have a good amount of water in it, that right there might just make a difference. In which, of course, they do decide, like, what if we just, like, bring like a little bit of water from basically the beach on them. In which he thinks, you know what, that's not the worst idea in the world. Just carry on like a small jar, maybe like a small esque jar. And he says that he should be able to connect with all of it, and he'll be able to tell if any of them are injured, hurt for the most part, and he can kind of basically utilize that water to help them or heal them, in which is a pretty interesting aspect as long as there's no massive injuries, which there shouldn't be, right? And or Izuku could definitely use it to help out if he runs through the area to basically help other heroes. And that's what happens. They run through the areas, Izuku heals people up as they need it, but on top of that, when he sees someone go by and they need help, he utilizes the water that they literally have in their pocket as a way to basically gain them the upper hand. If he runs by one of the heroes, like let's say he runs by Tamaki and he's struggling, Izuku would immediately break the vial of water and would basically slice toward the legs of the villains, knocking them all off their feet, giving the upper hand to Tamaki once again. And Izuku would do this as he just basically makes his way around the entirety of the base, knocking out, defeating, and also capturing a lot of the villains, defeating a ton of them and handling them very, very easily. But of course, after the Shiha Zaikai is taken down and he works with Sir Night-Eye quite a bit more throughout this time, well, he of course would have the normal things go on with the Class 1A versus Class 1B, and Izuku himself, I mean, would show off incredible powers throughout this time. I mean, his powers have basically evolved to the point where nobody's really going to touch him. I mean, at the end of the day, no one's going to really be able to handle the power that he outputs, and no one's going to be able to really handle his capabilities. And Izuku would show off, for the most part, every aspect of his quirk and every aspect that proves day in and day out that it truly is godly. But with all that said, there's one last attempt, one last thing that actually Pro Hero Hawks is getting his ears and eyes on very, very quickly. And that is a last-ditch effort. A last-ditch effort to get All For One, Shigaraki, Kurogiri, and other villains out of prison. And that right there is a bit of a prison break. A prison break that many, well, would not be expecting initially, but when Hawks would get information days out from the prison break, preparations would be in order, and they would have basically a couple days to prepare to stop an invasion / kind of prison break of high-end Nomus and Gigantomachia. And, well, let's just say Sir Night-Eye chimes in and tells everybody that they need to bring a lot of water, in which they're wondering, what do you mean? Like you talking about that kid, like that kid that has that quirk? I mean, dude, it's just a water quirk. You really think it's going to be, but no, he's like, I'm dead serious. In which they look to see if maybe the weather is, you know, bad that day. Maybe it's going to rain. And well, let's just say a support hero by the name of Mei Hatsume actually begins to get on that, saying that they can make some sort of weather thing happen, you know, maybe like a weather kind of a chooser type of thing. And she says, like, you know what, if they can somehow get a certain area pinpointed, or basically just like a certain radius around the prison, they might be able to make it rain, like, you know, actual water, not make it rain the other way. Get your heads out of the gutter. In which she basically tells them, like, if they can make it rain over there, you know, the water should be enough for Izuku to do whatever Izuku does. In which Hawks would ask, what exactly is he going to do? And well, Izuku's like, well, it depends on what you want me to do. The rain itself can be converted immediately into something that will give all you guys more stamina, more kind of regeneration abilities, and also, like, you know, just flat out just more time as heroes and fighting. And on top of that, the rain itself will make a lot of these other Nomus, or whatever this Gigantomachia, mountainous creature, whatever it is, a lot more vulnerable. In which, hearing this, Hawks is like, okay, I get it now. A lot of rain, a lot of water, a lot of preparation. In which they prepare a ton of things for this, More specifically, though, preparing Midnight for a possible need to take down Gigantomachia with her pheromones. But on top of that, Izuku's weakening using the rain. And this is something that, let's just say, this last gambit toward the prisons, we're not ready for. Because even a high-end Nomu that, well, Endeavor took on, well, that high-end Nomu may be powerful, may be strong, maybe at the level of these high-end Nomus, but they weren't affected by the rain, the heavenly rain, that Izuku is going to act upon them. So when the day comes, when the prison break arrives, and the rain starts clattering off the ground, and the rain starts splattering off the Nomus and the creatures all around, that right there is the hero's move to go forward. And guess who's also here to fight alongside everyone? All Might himself. The final gambit, the final prison break, it all ends here, and it will all end with All Might at the front of everything, and All Might still that number one hero that everyone can look at and everyone can aspire to be. Now, with all that said, they would run forward, they would fight, and Izuku would control water and basically utilize his powers to its fullest extent to slow down, to make them more vulnerable, to do anything that would basically help them in a positive manner. And Izuku would have his stamp on the battlefield, even if he's not a massive person involved, quote unquote, in the eyes of the public. And Izuku would shut down, and everybody would shut down this entire fight. And the water itself even has an interesting effect on Gigantomachia, slowing him down and making him more tired over time. Eventually, all the Nomus, eventually Gigantomachia, and all of the people and all the creatures and all the absolute abominations are shut down and stopped, all in the way of stopping them from getting All for One and many other villains out of prison. And luckily enough, everything would come to an end. Every last bit would come to an end, and everything that, well, could have gone really bad didn't actually go really bad. And Izuku Midoriya may not get the credit he so deserves, but everybody who knows what happened, well, they give him all the credit he possibly is due. And let's just say Hawks will be speaking quite a bit and quite highly over the young Izuku Midoriya, the true Aqua deity, because this kid has a future in being a hero. And after years of being in schooling, from his first to second to third year, Izuku Midoriya, hero named Aqua deity, would finally be taking the stage as a hero. Now, his absolute chances of becoming the number one, his journey to becoming the number one, it's a difficult one. It's a struggle, and frankly, it might even be borderline impossible. But he pushes, he tries his best, but his competition is not weak. His competition is not that far off from some of the greatest heroes to possibly ever exist, with All Might still running the show just a couple years after he got out of schooling, and with Mirio on the rise, and with so many other heroes on the rise as well, working at a really, really high level. Let's just say Izuku Midoriya, well, with his godly powers, with his godly water powers, may have his advantages, and may have advantages that many would consider to be a blessing. But at the same time, Izuku, well, it's not easy to be the number one. But even with that said, the push to being number one is not necessarily out of reach, as long as the water keeps flowing and as long as the river keeps running. But Izuku Midoriya, well, and his journey ends here. This will be the end of What If Deku Had a Godly Water Quirk.